splashing water. Amina's cheeks burned, and she kept her head down, hoping no one would connect her to the story. But deep down, a small part of her felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the prince would come back. Maybe he would remember her. By the time the sun began to set, Amina was exhausted. She returned home with Madame Dozy and her stepsisters, carrying the unsold vegetables on her head. As she approached the compound, she heard a commotion. Villagers were gathering outside their gate, murmuring excitedly. "What is going on?" Madame Dozy demanded, pushing through the crowd. Standing in the center of the crowd was Prince Emeka, his regal presence unmistakable. He turned toward Madame Dozy and spoke with authority. "I have come to speak with Amina." Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Amina's heart stopped. Her stepmother's face twisted with shock and barely concealed anger. Bola and Chinya exchanged looks of disbelief. "Amina?" Madame Dozy repeated, her voice rising. What could the prince possibly want with her? Emeka's gaze was steady. "I would like to speak with her. Alone." The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. Amina stepped forward hesitantly, her heart pounding in her chest. The villagers' eyes burned into her, some curious, others filled with disbelief. Madame Ngozi's face flushed with anger as she moved to block Amina's path. "Your Highness," Madame Ngozi began, forcing a smile. "I'm afraid Amina is quite busy with her chores. Surely you'd prefer to speak to one of my other daughters, Bola or Chinyere." Emeka's expression didn't waver. "Thank you, Madame Ngozi, but I wish to speak to Amina." Madame Ngozi hesitated, her smile faltering. She turned to Amina, her eyes flashing with warning. "Go inside, Amina. Now." But before Amina could retreat, the prince spoke again, his voice firm yet kind. "Amina, will you step out and speak with me?" The villagers gasped in unison. This was no simple request. It was a direct order. Amina looked at her stepmother, then at the prince. She knew there would be consequences for disobeying Madame Ngozi, but the look in Prince Emeka's eyes gave her courage. "Yes, my prince," she said softly, stepping forward. The crowd parted to let her through. Madame Ngozi glared at her, but Amina kept her gaze on the ground as she walked toward the prince. When she stood before him, he gestured for her to follow him to a quieter corner of the compound. "I'm sorry for the scene," Emeka said once they were alone. "I didn't mean to cause you any trouble." Amina shook her head. "It's not your fault, my prince. I'm just surprised you would want to speak to me." Emeka smiled. "Why wouldn't I? You seem kind, hard-working, and genuine. I don't meet many people like you." Amina's cheeks flushed. "Thank you, my prince. I wanted to ask you something," Emeka continued, his tone serious. "Would you consider attending a gathering at the palace tomorrow? I'd like to get to know you better." Amina's eyes widened. "The palace? But I'm just a servant in my own home. I'm not like the other girls you've met." "Exactly," Emeka said, his gaze steady. "That's why I'm asking you." For a moment, Amina couldn't speak. Her mind raced with doubts and fears. What would her stepmother say? How would the villagers react? But beneath the fear, a tiny spark of hope began to grow. Perhaps this was her chance to break free from the life she had always known. If my stepmother allows it, I will come," she said finally. Emeka nodded. "I will make sure she does. Until tomorrow, Amina." As he walked away, the crowd erupted into whispers. Amina turned to face Madame Ngozi, whose expression was thunderous. Bola and Chinyere stood behind her, their faces twisted with jealousy. "You've embarrassed me," Madame Ngozi hissed as the villagers began to disperse. "We'll talk about this later." Amina lowered her head and returned to her chores, but her heart felt lighter. For the first time, she allowed herself to dream of a life beyond her stepmother's shadow. Prepared for her journey to the palace. Madame Ngozi, fuming but powerless against the prince's wishes, begrudgingly handed her an old wrapper to wear. It was plain and worn, a sharp contrast to the lavish outfits she had reserved for Bola and Chinière. "Don't embarrass me further," Madame Ngozi snapped as Amina adjusted the wrapper. "Go, do whatever the prince wants, and don't forget your place." Amina nodded silently, too excited to let her stepmother's words dampen her spirits. She tied her scarf neatly, grabbed the basket she had prepared with fresh fruits as a gift, and began the walk to the palace. The villagers watched her with a mix of curiosity and envy. Whispers followed her every step. How did someone like Amina catch the prince's attention? She must have bewitched him. There's no other explanation. But Amina ignored them, her heart focused on what lay ahead. The palace gates loomed tall and majestic, guarded by soldiers in gleaming uniforms. As she approached, one of the guards stepped forward. "Are you Amina?" he asked, his tone formal. "Yes," she replied, clutching her basket tightly. "Follow me." The guard led her through the grand gates and into the palace grounds. Amina's breath caught as she took in the beauty around her, manicured gardens, fountains that sparkled in the sunlight, and towering walls adorned with intricate carvings. It was like stepping into another world. Prince Emeka awaited her in a shaded courtyard, dressed in a simple but elegant tunic. He smiled warmly as she approached. "Amina, I'm glad you came," he said, his voice as kind as she remembered. "Thank you for inviting me, my prince," she replied, bowing slightly. He gestured for her to sit on a cushioned bench beneath a flowering tree. "You don't have to be so formal. Today, I want to get to know you, the real you." Amina hesitated but eventually sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Emeka began asking her questions about her life, her family, and her dreams. At first, she answered, cautiously, unsure of how much to reveal. But as the conversation flowed, she found herself relaxing. She told him about her late parents, how her stepmother had taken her in but treated her as little more than a servant. She spoke of her love for weaving and how she often